Yo, hello. Welcome to part 2. I'm Christian. Thanks for joining. So this time around, we're going to be taking a look into CSS modules and kind of the advantages they bring and how to implement them using Webpack. The previous video had a quick little stab at implementing CSS modules, but it was right at the very end of the video and it was pretty late. So we'll start from scratch in this video and just make that the core focus of this video. So all the code for this series can be found in the GitHub link in the description, which is just somewhere down there. And you'll find a load of raft of other useful links down there as well. Anything to do with the project will be down there. So before we dive into CSS modules, let's take a quick look at where we've come from in terms of what we've been doing with CSS over the past few years. So I'm sure most people have kind of hit the pain on fairly large applications where trying to keep your CSS maintainable becomes really, really difficult. To the point of you end up changing a few styles over here, and then what you end up finding is something over the other side of your application has had an adverse effect. Perhaps you've targeted LIA, and that's targeted all A elements under an LI, and that's just gone horribly wrong, and maybe you've just added a little bit too much padding or margin and it's had a bad effect somewhere else. So in real large applications, this becomes a bit of a problem. So in recent years, we've had a number of methodologies which help us trying to keep CSS maintainable. So we've had OOCSS, SMAX, I always forget how to pronounce that one, BEM, and a few more. Now BEM's arguably one of the most popular ones of these. Although at its core, BEM is just a naming convention. It's simply putting a few little restrictions on yourself to allow you to be able to kind of scope your CSS. So you're only targeting a specific element with a particular class selector. If you're watching this live and you've got any questions, then feel free to fire away and I'll keep trying to check the chat every so often. So, what's a trend that's been happening over the past few years is we've had a rise of this component kind of architecture, whether this be web components, wherever they are. Seem to have been waiting for those for years, and they're quite far off as far as I can tell. So we've had Polymer to kind of like polyfill web components in there, but then we've had libraries and kind of frameworks such as like React and Vue.js, which are all kind of component based, which are really trying to fill that void in of making it really easy to create applications using components. So we're starting to see components that are a collection of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and images kind of all thrown and bagged into one, and we get this kind of usable component that we can just throw anywhere kind of on the page, and it will just work. It has all its dependencies already like predefined. So with tools kind of like Webpack, it's really led us to be able to structure our apps in a completely different way. Each component can have its own folder, and inside that folder we could have a JavaScript file, a CSS file, and any images that the component depends on. And in the JavaScript file, for example, kind of in a React kind of application within Webpack, we can import those images, we can import those CSS styles, and everything just kind of gets bundled nicely like that. Vue.js, I believe, has I can't remember the name of it, but it might be a component template, and inside that component template you can have your HTML, your CSS, and any JavaScript in there, and it's all in one single file. And this is kind of like something that over the past decade we've been trying to get away from. We've been trying to make this split between our HTML, our CSS, and our JavaScript, and all of a sudden we're kind of going, hey, let's bring all those back together. So yeah, I guess it's really kind of a case of like our separation of concerns is no longer by language, but instead it's by each piece or component of our application. So in short, I kind of describe CSS modules as kind of like a scoped CSS, like BEM, but without having the pain of having the crazy naming conventions, as kind of like Webpack will take care of that for us. So let's have a quick dive in to Webpack and see kind of CSS modules in action. Oh, hi, I think there's a 3-second delay. Cool, okay, might be a little problem with the audio. I'll see if I can kind of like download maybe that and correct it after. So, I'm just checking here. Okay, cool. Hopefully everybody can see everything. Let's just make everything bigger. So, first things first, what we need to do is, we have our basic kind of project structure here. Let me just delete this little CSS file. So, it's a really rough application structure at the minute. We don't really have folders of components yet, but we'll kind of get there over time. So first things first, if we just add a new file called app.css, and everything that's stored in app.css will be used within our JavaScript, our React component in here. So in our JavaScript application here, we simply just have a h1 with hello world. And in here, if we were just to create a class called heading and throw in here color red, we ultimately want to be able to import this CSS into this JavaScript file, reference it in the h1 and use it. So let's do that. So if we were to import styles from where we're going to import it from is just locally app.css. We have to explicitly put the .css extension on there. By default, Node is just going to automatically try and, if you were just to put app, it would automatically try and append .js to the end of the file and import it that way. It's got no idea we're supposed to be dealing with CSS, seeing as that's a Webpack specific thing. So yeah, we've explicitly got to put .css on the end there. Cool, okay, so this is kind of crazy. We're including CSS, or at least we're trying to include CSS in our JavaScript. So your guess is as good as mine that we're probably going to have issues with this. So if we do a yarn start and just wait for everything to build up. So what we can see here is we can see there's an error here, and it basically has just said you may need appropriate loader to handle this file type. So it's trying to import this CSS file, and the application has gone, hey, I have no idea what this CSS is. This syntax does not look like JavaScript. There's an error. And that's cool. That's kind of what we were expecting. So one thing we can do now is we can configure Webpack to be aware of CSS files and deal with them in an appropriate manner. So there's two things that we need for this. We have two different loaders, what we're going to take advantage of. First is the CSS Loader, and the second is the Style Loader. And I'll kind of describe those in a little bit more detail once we've got them installed. So if we do a yarn add dev, and we want first the CSS Loader, and secondly, we'll have the Style Loader. So Yarn's going to install them, put them as a development dependency, and we should be good. So we've got them now. So we're going to extend our rules for our Webpack configuration. And within here, we're going to test for CSS files. And that should do that. There is great documentation actually on this. CSS loading in Webpack is a very well documented thing. I guess it must be quite a popular thing to do. So within the loader section of the documentation, we have the CSS loader here, we have the style loader, and you'll use those kind of in conjunction with each other for most of your development. And let me just pop over here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put use in here and pop an array in, and within here we'll just throw in an object, and we'll have loader, and we'll throw in style loader. Again, we've got to be explicit with this loader. Webpack 1 didn't require us to be explicit. We could simply omit that and just put style. Then the second loader we're going to use is going to be the CSS loader. So here we can just put loader in, CSS loader, and the CSS loader was going to take a few options. So for the options, we're going to have say modules is equal to true. We want to activate CSS modules within our application. And the way loaders work is they work kind of the wrong way round. So first things first is it's going to use the CSS loader, and then it's going to pass everything over to the style loader. So we kind of work backwards in our configuration. And the order of this is important. If we put the style loader after the CSS loader, things just wouldn't work. And the reason for that is the CSS loader is going to take your CSS and create a JavaScript module from it. Now, the reason we have a specific kind of a loader for that is, one, we need to be able to read and parse CSS. That's not kind of a standard thing, so the CSS loader has support for that. And also, CSS has kind of explicit dependencies. So in your CSS, you can have URLs to images, to fonts. Usually they're going to be relative paths. So if you've got an image in the same folder, it's just going to be ./myimage.jpg, and you could import that and reference that within your CSS. So what this loader is going to do as well is it's going to replace all those relative paths with a final URL once Webpack's got hold of that asset, moved it into the required location during the build process, and if, for example, it's on S3, it's going to put that correct path to S3 in there for us. So once we've got that CSS loaded and it's in a JavaScript module, what the style loader does is a style loader is going to pretty much create a link, a style tag for us and insert that into the page. So it's basically going to take the JavaScript module, convert it to kind of CSS and insert it into the page for us. So that's why we've got to have it in that specific order, just so that works. So let's run this and see what mess we kind of get ourselves into now. Fingers crossed, this is going to be good. Okay, cool. The linting is just saying we imported styles and it was defined but never used. And we can kind of see that here. We're using it. We're importing it and not using it. So with React, if we were just to reference the particular class in the class name, things should work perfectly fine. So our class here is called heading. So if we throw styles.heading in here, refresh, and excellent. We can see our color red has been imported. And what Webpack has done is it's created this kind of like crazy hash looking class name, which I'm not sure about you, but it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm certainly not going to be able to map it back to the original style where I kind of imported it from. So So what we can do is we can configure Webpack to kind of give it a bit more of a friendly name, so we're able to kind of work with this a little bit easier. The way we do that is we give it a local ident name. Now, the local ident name is simply just going to specify the structure of the class name that we give this. So I tend to like to kind of give it the name, the local, and we'll see what these mean in a minute. And then I'm going to use a hash here, and we're going to make the hash. It's going to be created from a base 64, and we're going to just kind of give it a character length of 6. So if we just restart the Webpack server, and refresh here, what we can see what's happened to the class name is we can see it's so much more readable now. So essentially what's happened here is we've got the name, and the name has been taken straight from the name of the component. So you noticed, I'm pointing to the screen, that doesn't help you at all. So yeah, we can see we've got app.js here, and it's just taking the name from there. Then we use the local, and the local is simply the actual class name what we're using. In our case here, it's heading. So app heading, and then we get the first 6 characters of the hash that was generated. And this is great. So this is almost BEM-like notation without kind of having to do any of the annoying hard work yourself. Do the configuration in Webpack, and that will just take care of everything for you. The great thing about this is there's never going to be a clash of 2 components or classes having or any components basically having the same class name. So you're never going to get a clash and a conflicting of styles. We could have multiple app.js's and multiple headings, and the hash is always going to be different, and we're going to be safe. So this is all well and good. There is one caveat of I like to write my CSS in a particular way where it's words separated by a little hyphen. So if I said heading 1, this is great, and in CSS that's the way I like it. In JavaScript, this kind of gives us a little bit of a headache. What we have here is we have wrong file. Is if we wanted to reference this now, we simply can't do heading 1. It's invalid JavaScript. We've got an object here, and if we try and access something off of that object using the hash, it uses this as like the minus sign. So it's basically like heading take away 1, which is never going to work. So this is where the square bracket notation comes in. Now it looks pretty ugly having to do this everywhere, and fortunately there's a nice workaround for this. So within our options for our Webpack configuration, what we can do is we can say camel case is true, assuming I can spell true. So what that's effectively going to do is it's going to make our class name appear like this for our JavaScript, which is great. So in here I can get rid of the square bracket notation, keep the dot notation, and do heading 1 like so. So I'll just have to restart Webpack in order for it to pick that new configuration up. Refresh here now, and you can see app-heading-1, and it's just nicely converting that class name into camel case for us, which is perfect. I get to write the CSS how I've always written CSS and how I love to write CSS, and I don't have to have any of the ugliness of the square bracket notation in JavaScript, so that's a huge big win for me. So I said earlier that what the CSS Loader did is it took the CSS and it created a JavaScript module of that. And I kind of want to prove that to you that that's the case. At the minute, although what's happening is we get a style tag pushed out here. It's all the style loader doing that from our JavaScript. So if we were to open up our bundle.js file, open a new tab, that should do it. And in here, if we search for heading 1, cool, yeah. There's probably multiple references to it here. So you can see, here's our CSS that has been created into a JavaScript module that's imported, that we imported into our JavaScript. So it's kind of how it's all working behind the scenes, just converting it to a JavaScript module and working with it that way, and then pushing it back out to CSS. So this is cool. Now, usually when I'm kind of starting an application off as well, I rely on Normalize Dot Css. So it'd be great to bring that into our application. So super simple and easy to do. We could just do a yarn add --dev normalize dot css. So let's chuck this into the mix. Perfect. So we've got normalize in here now. Now, given a little bit more application structure, I may put this in a slightly different place, but just for now, I should be able to put normalize.css. Let's start our application again. And from here, cool. Yeah, so what we can see here is Normalize has changed our font here, which is pretty cool. So what's happened now is we've got Normalize being brought in, and as a first style tag, and then our application specific code coming in as the second example. This is all well and good, and this is perfectly fine in development. We can work with this in development by just having our CSS bundled in our JavaScript and then extracting it out as a style attribute. Quick cheeky drink. The problem with this is, in production, that is not going to be performant. We're going to download all of our JavaScript. We're going to start parsing our JavaScript. We're going to start throwing React components onto the page if we haven't been server-side rendered. And then we're going to have the styles just thrown in at the top of the page. So we could get potentially a flash of unstyled content, which is not what we want. Also, it'd be nice if the page did work without having to have JavaScript turned on. So if it was a server-side rendered page, we'd get the full HTML. And then we don't want to have to rely on JavaScript to bring in the styles. We just want the styles as serving up as a regular style sheet. So Webpack has our back covered here as well. So there's a plugin called the Extract Text plugin. Now, we're using Webpack 2, which is currently in the last release candidate before it goes live. So there's also a beta version or a release candidate version of the Extract Text plugin for Webpack, which we'll have to use. So in order to kind of get access to this, we could probably either install from beta, or as I like to do, I like to check the version numbers out. I'm not sure why. It's possibly just a little bit of OCD. But if we do a yarn info, and the package is called, I think it's extract. Certainly got a long name. Extract Text Webpack plugin. Perfectly. So if we ask for more info on this, specifying the time, we will just get a list of every single version number with the date that version number was kind of created. So great, we get the fact version 2 beta 5 was released a couple of days ago, I think. Yep, which is perfect. So if we were to add the Extract Text Webpack plugin into our list of dependencies. What we can do from here is, in fact, one thing I'll do is I'll just take this off for now, so we're just at a good point. And within our Webpack config, things are going to change up a little bit. So what we're going to do is, we don't need this style loader anymore. The style loader was simply for taking the CSS module and converting that into style tag at runtime. It's kind of not what we want. What we want, at least in production, is the ability to extract all of this to a CSS file and serve that up. So if we just get rid of this for now, so we're still in our CSS area, and we want to specify the loader as the extract text plugin, and we're going to call extract on here. We also need to import this at the top of the file. Perfect. And I believe it needs to go in as a plugin at the bottom. It does, yeah. So I'm going to do a new extract text plugin, and then we can give it a file name. We can give it more options, but just for our example, what we'll do is we'll give it a name. Again, we're using this specific Webpack kind of style notation with a square bracket and name, and it's just going to put the name of the bundle we're kind of dealing with here. By default, that's going to be main, but if we started having multiple bundles, we could give them specific names. We're just going to call it .css. So here, let's configure this loader a little bit more. So one thing we want to do now is we want to specify a fallback loader, and that's just going to be style loader. Now, that's in the documentation. I'm not quite sure why it's there. Ideally, we don't really want to fall back there, but the documentation says it's there. Let's just go with it for safety for now. Then we're going to specify further loaders. So this is where our CSS loader comes in, because we're still going to have to import the CSS and create a JavaScript module for it, so we can successfully import the CSS within our JavaScript. So we throw in the CSS loader here. And just for now, I'm going to do this as the query string kind of syntax, where we're going to specify modules. We also want to give it a local ident name. And let's have that equal to pretty much what we had before. So let's have it as the name, the local, and the hash, with a colon, yeah, base 64, length 6. Okay. Let's give this a bit of a bash. Don't forget the commas. They will bite you. Yarn start again. Okay, let's just throw that as style.css. I think that was what it was playing at. Nope. Cool. The funs of live coding. Let me just throw that in there. This is previously on. Let's give this a quick play beforehand. No! Chunk entry was removed. Use has a runtime. Let's just make sure we've got the right version of Yes, I obviously did a whoopsie when we installed the extract text plugin. So what did I put for that? Oh yeah, I didn't give it a specific version. And what was that? That was this. My bad. This is exactly why we needed to use the beta version. My apologies for that. Yarn start that one, and we should be up and running and good to go now, yes. So if we refresh this page now, what we'll see is instead of a style tag, we'll have a link tag to a style.css file. And inside this CSS file is we have all the normalize and a little bit of app-specific code here. So this is cool. That's exactly what we want in production. In development, we'll fall back and we'll use the style loader, just because that can be hot module reloaded, whereas a style tag, the link tag, and the extract text Webpack plugin cannot be. So hopefully this has been useful kind of introduction to CSS modules and how to kind of set them up on Webpack. We'll probably, let's leave it there, and for the next episode we will either start to split the Webpack plugin into a development version and a production version, or we'll start cracking on with the application a little bit more, but we will probably need to extract those the Webpack config into two separate plugins, because a production plugin and a dev plugin, because we can already see now, like, we're starting to hit a couple of pain points if we want to test things like for production and build for production, and that requires a different setup and configuration than for development. So I'll have a think of where to take it next. But yeah, thank you ever so much for kind of tuning in. We'll call it there, and we'll leave it as a shorter night. You can follow me on Twitter at ROEBUK. It's Roebuck without the little curly C. Yeah, thanks for joining, and catch you later.